Great. Awesome.
Yeah.
You know what? And that's one of the things that I think that there is a disconnect at this point, because while I believe that MCs are still talking back, I just think that at this point, I think the knowledge on how to talk back, I think that correlates with education. It's not something that's really been enforced, and one of the things I'm sensitive about is the 4th grade failure syndrome. And I think that being literate, more than just reading words on a page, actually being literate in your craft and about your people's history is one of the deepest, one of the most the most I'd say I'd say it's the number one reason why hip hop seemingly has lost its way. And now the work that you do with the social work that you do, the community activism that you're engaged in, I want to get back to that. How you think hip hop and what you do, can forge how we can reach those young men.
I think that's a great question. I'm very critical of where hip hop is right now, but I also think that there is a generational divide between the civil rights generation and the hip hop generation. I think that I don't want to get into, conscious hip hop, gangster rap and things of that nature. I'm alarmed at the degrading forms and the dehumanizing forms of hip hop, whether it's in the lyrics, whether it's, in the videos and things of that nature. But from a strength-based perspective, I'm on the board of trustees for the Philadelphia prisons, and I'm on the board of trustees for the Community College of Philadelphia. How can we take hip hop from a positive standpoint and implement it into the lives of young people to deal with them where they're at? One of the ways I've been able to do that is looking at the song that Jay-Z and Benny Siegel have off of the Dynasty album, talking about the angst and the pain of their dads not being in their lives. You hear Jay-Z articulate, Monster had his dad. You hear Jay-Z talking about, sitting on the bench, we never kicked at a ball, and things of that nature. And I'm also need to go on record by simply saying I'm not a hip-hop lyricist, so like I might get the lyrics mixed up, but I know the song, and when I'm listening to it, I can go with it. But then you hear Benny Siegel, come and when he comes out with his album, he revisits that pain. And you probably know the song better than I do, but I know the lyrics. He revisits that pain when he says, yo, Scrap, I hear that you thought about that. And he's really trying to tell his dad, it's like, nah, let me let you know that, I wanted to have a father too. I've been able to use that song from two standpoints, a therapeutic sense and also a literary sense. Young black males and Latino males I've worked with for the past 15 years as a social practitioner have been able to read hip-hop lyrics where teachers are saying that they can't read. Well, maybe the child is not challenged, maybe the teacher's challenged. How's it that the teacher can't read the lyrics, but the kid can read the lyrics? The same kid that you said doesn't understand Pythagoras' theorem or whatever the case may be. Being able to do that, and then also taking the time out to say, how can I look at The Wire from not just a sociological lens, but also from an aspect of being able to develop a syllabus or develop some lessons out of that to give to young black males. So over the years, I've been able to borrow some stuff from Gangstar, and Guru. I've been able to look at a lot of things from Tupac, a lot of things from Tupac when he talks about, the rose that grew from concrete. So using that book of poems to get young black males to read. What's also important is not that black and Latino males just hear the lyrics, but to print the lyrics out so that they can read the lyrics, so they can see the lyrics. And then if they're having some problems with reading, they need someone to sit with them, guide them, read over it again, and things of that nature. And I find that looking at young black and Latino males and the challenges that they have, as you mentioned, going from 4th grade, we're able to look at test scores for the dropout rate, and we're able to look at how many prisons we're going to build, the school-to-prison pipeline. I think that we need to look at hip-hop literacy and the pedagogy of hip-hop. And I know you're well aware of my colleague Mark Lamont Hill, who's up at Columbia University, who's able to do that. And I think that that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of what hip-hop can do as it relates to where young black and Latino males are. We can improve test scores, which we know are rooted in cultural biasness. But more importantly, we can get them to tell their narrative. So this is what Jay-Z is saying, this is what Nas is saying, this is what KRS-One is saying, What do you feel about these lyrics? So sort of like in a hermeneutic sense, I've been able to put on the song Love's Gonna Get You, you know, Sound of the Police, Black Cop, you know, when KRS-One says Officer Overseer, say it with a Rude Boy sample, you know, Officer, Officer, Overseer, Overseer, you know, then he gives the different descriptions that the officer, you know, patrols the United Nations, the overseer, he patrols the plantation, and we see that in our communities. We see that when KRS-One talks about, you know, black drug dealer, if you're going to sell drugs, build us a school. It takes me back to how hip-hop, Rick Ross wants to borrow the moniker of Rick Ross, the drug dealer, who's now reformed. And I had Rick Ross, the real Rick Ross, on my show, Wise Talk, WURD. And, you know, one of the questions I put forward to him was, you know, do you have, looking back now that you're in the moment, looking back on the utter chaos and destruction of our community because of drugs, do you see how you played an essential part in that? And you know, he was on the air and everything, calling them from Los Angeles. He said he does. The key, though, is how we borrow these identities, but they're not real identities. Right. So we know that the Rick Ross that's down in Miami was a correctional officer. Right. You know, we know that a lot of these guys don't come from the circumstances that they're talking about, and that's okay. But one of the things we do know is that the minds are fragile of young people. So back to what KRS-One was saying, if you're going to sell drugs and build us a school, we can borrow from Deep Cover, where Lawrence Fishburne in that character says the money doesn't know where it's coming from. But we're destroying the community, but you didn't build any schools, to the real Rick Ross. And that's what KRS-One, to me, was getting at. You didn't build churches. You didn't give money to this. But we also have to provide a critique. We know that it's an art form that degrades black women, is misogynist, it's just something that, you know, we have to say to ourselves, can we rise above that? You know, and that's where I'm at. You know, as a supporter of the culture, you know, I have to be able to be a social critic of it as well. So I find it problematic when, you know, I look at a video imagery of Jay-Z, Big Pimpin' spinning G's, and Cristal and all types of stuff are being poured over women's breasts. I mean, I find that kind of problematic. You know, and I look at that and I say that we got to do better. You know, just the crisis that we're in now, we have to, you know. But I do understand that, you know, there's criticisms and they're not fair and they're unwarranted. So when Karl Rove talks about, you know, Common, we're not talking about Ice-T. Right. You know, we're talking about, cop killer. Yeah. We're talking about Common. You know, but yet I don't blame the ills of the society on hip hop. Right. Which I think a lot of people do. It's a scapegoat. The biggest gangsters is the United States of America and its government. Martin Luther King says the greatest purveyor of violence is my own government, and he was talking about the United States. So for Karl Rove to talk about Common's lyric didn't do to people what George Bush, Condoleezza Rice, and Donald Rumsfeld did. Right. You know, so, you know, I say don't use black and brown bodies as a scapegoat for an empire that has oppressed and marginalized people for a considerable period of time.